Yes, the question today is, should Priti Patel resign for ugly behaviour?
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. Our mantra is the business of religion and the religion of business. Now, as you heard Clergyman Pete talk about, Boris Johnson's advisor on the Ministerial Code has resigned after the Prime Minister himself actually backed the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, over a bullying inquiry. Now, as you can see on screen, the media has been all over this subject. Well, who is right and who is wrong? Now, the Standards Chief, Sir Alex Allen, found that Miss Patel had broken the code governing ministers' behaviour. This is rather serious, but nevertheless, Boris Johnson himself has actually rejected his findings. And he said that he didn't think that Miss Patel was a bully and had full confidence in her and her abilities. Well, many people are saying, hold on, wait a minute, isn't this just letting off for bad behaviour? Well, when the head of the committee in the capital city investigates ugly behaviour from a minister, it's a terrible pity when you're not very pretty and the outcome is somewhat sinister. Clergyman Pete,
yes, absolutely.
sinister behaviour indeed. Who is right and who is wrong? Should Boris Johnson have actually removed Miss Patel?
Well, that is the question, and the thing about this is, what I would say at the outset is that this isn't going to be controversial. I would say bullying is wrong. Yes, I know you heard it here first, but the
Quite.
Bible says in many places it's against such actions. Proverbs 3:31, it says, "Don't act like bullies or learn their ways." It's pretty pretty clear that this is not a good way to behave, bullying. The question, though, is whether you can say Priti Patel truly is bullying, and this is why I have a slight problem with the inquiry. In that, what we're talking about, the people we're talking about being bullied by Priti Patel, are civil servants who are experienced in dealing with ministers. You know, they're people who you would have thought could stand up for themselves. So, although a minister, is in authority over them, it's not the same way as, say, their management in direct line above them. There's a different sort of relationship, a certain distance where you might say, well, really, was she really bullying? So it just puts a little bit of doubt in my mind as to whether the sort of activity, she was shouting at people, apparently this intimidated them. I mean, that's what we take from the report. And of course, swearing, which we don't approve of, heaven forfend. But my question, Business and Mark, is from my point of view, yes, it's wrong. Bullying is wrong, but was this exactly bullying? But I mean, from a businessman's point of view,
Yeah.
presumably this just wouldn't be acceptable, her behavior. I mean, if she were leading a business, this would be a serious problem.
Well, I'm going to ask the point here and trying to sort of set about context,
Hmm.
because you're right. If somebody is deemed to be using foul language or blasphemous language, of course, that type of behavior would, on the surface, be inappropriate. And absolutely, that would contravene, certainly in this particular case, in government, contravene, obviously, the minister's code. But the question is that using foul language, yes, of course, there are different grades of language and there are different terms and phrases that one would use. Now, the question is, was she provoked? So, for example,
Okay.
was it that her situation was so exasperating that it drew any sane person to come out with expletives? And so I do wonder here, where, as Priti Patel herself has actually said, she did not intentionally intend to really offend. She wasn't set out to go and bully. And there's 2 points here. One accusation is bad language, and the other accusation is bullying. Well, bad language, yes, if you were using continual bad language, you might get a reprimand, certainly in business, and that would be something that you'd be called to account. The bullying is usually what I will call around sustainable activity, where you might be continually targeting a group or an individual and trying to actually oust them or get them to do something against their will. Essentially, you're cajoling them, and you're doing something which does counter the point of respect. And respect is a very, very fine line between somebody who needs to be assertive and somebody who can be perpetually bullying. And that's where I think we just don't have enough information. I'm going to say, and this is just a general point, positions of authority are very difficult to hold. And I think that the Home Secretary position is probably one of the most awkward and difficult roles to take in government. It's been a poison chalice for many, many people in the past. We saw Theresa May in that role, and some parts of her tenure worked, some parts didn't. And I would imagine that from what I've seen of individuals like that who said that actually, even though that she eventually became prime minister, being a home secretary was a tough role. I don't envy Priti Patel because there's a lot of things to take on board. One obvious observation is civil servants. They've had a good time of it in recent times, and what I mean by that is that there's a lot of inefficiencies. Boris Johnson himself has actually brought this out. And I think that what he's really looking for is somebody who can bring a bit more discipline. Now, sometimes when you bring discipline, you have to chastise people, you have to correct people, and you have to get with people conforming to ways which are a lot more efficient. And it's interesting how this subject about Priti Patel's behaviour is something that's not just on the agenda today. It's been on the agenda for well over a year, if not longer. I think she's the sort of individual who probably takes the view that I'm going to try and shake up the departments to really get rid of some of the old baggage. And I think as a result, it's quite possible that this report was slightly biased in the
Yeah.
sense that it didn't conform to the ways of the past. But now maybe it does require somebody like Priti Patel to shake it up, and they don't like it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's right. I think that yes, we can see that from the report she did breach ministerial code, and I think actually there's no that is not being questioned. I mean, we've got the image here. We've got Priti Patel there, and then on the screen we have Boris Johnson
Oh yeah.
next to her. Now his
Which
decision
one's which again?
reach it's difficult to tell. They
The
could be
one in the
twins.
middle.
But Boris Johnson could, in his decision, really be saying, not to have encourage her to resign, not to sack her, which he could have done,
Oh yeah.
but rather to support her, and presumably he asked her to apologise, which she did. I think that he is in that saying she did because he's like she apologized. She did break the ministerial code, but she still should stay in her job. That's an interesting position to take, and that's really the one that I hold. In that, yes, as I was saying at the start, bullying is wrong. She did break the ministerial code, which it seems reasonable to have in place, but I think there's some very specific things going on in the political sphere at the moment. One of these is that the civil servant, to put it simply, have got too big for their boots.
Yes.
And perhaps another simple way of putting it, they need taking down a peg or two. I don't think that should involve swearing and shouting, which is the issue here, and intimidation in that way. But standing up for yourself should. Now, here's an interesting point that I would put it uh, uh, as a woman being accused of bullying. Normally, you'd get plenty of feminists speaking up and saying, "How dare you?" It's just because she's a woman. You'll notice that there's been a deafening silence from that side of
Yes.
things. That's because Priti Patel is not left wing. She doesn't sign up to identity politics, and so she has the wrong opinion. So immediately they just throw her under the bus. So I just wanted to point that out. That what you would say here, what would often be said is, it's just because it's a confident woman, isn't it? You can't take a confident woman speaking to you. If it had been a man, you wouldn't have said this. And the thing is, I think there may be an element of that.
Well, I'd like to look at the code in a lot more detail. This is a code, incidentally, that's been around since the Second World War, but was not made public until 1992. Now, the thing here is that this idea that you mustn't harass anyone, bully them, or intimidate them, this idea of consideration and respect is really the mantra. Well, great. And I think absolutely we would all conform to that, whether it be in government or in business or in society. I'm sure that your parishioners wouldn't want to be hear you swearing at the pulpit and chastising them in that way that intimidates them.
No, they complain every time I do it. Yes,
Well,
it's
quite
never
right.
popular. Never popular.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure that it's memorable every time. But the thing here is that it's interesting how this idea of behavior and the way that you act in the context of a situation. Now, we know that Priti Patel is a controversial character. She's had some run-ins with previous prime ministers like Theresa May through her comments and her antics, and perhaps maybe she could be learning a trick or two with some of the things that she's perhaps tripped up on over the past. But here's some other thoughts. Now, ministers have stepped down before. So Liam Fox, overtaking a friend and a lobbyist on official trips. And Mark Field, who grabbed a climate protester. We did a podcast on that, folks, if you
Yes.
remember. Now, some
Yes.
people say that he actually did the right thing in the context of the situation,
Yep.
which potentially
I
was a
believe I said
threat,
that. Yeah.
not just to himself or the people at the dining table and on the town hall, but potentially to other stakeholders. He wasn't to know. He had to make a decision. But nevertheless, that was something that was criticized for. He was criticized. I think in this particular case, what we are seeing is that we're seeing the fact that the government, this is the British government, actually now needs to change. And let's be honest, civil servants are consistent, politicians are not. And what I mean by that is that some civil servants can remain in their position for very, very many years, whereas somebody in a Home Secretary role may not last many years at all. It might be a tenure of 3 or 4 years, and it could even be less, as we've seen in the past. And I think that and this is, I'm going to, dare I say, yes, I'm going to go on record on saying this. Yes, I'm going to give credit a little bit to Boris Johnson, in that
Steady
he
on,
wants.
steady on.
I know I'm getting palpitations as I speak, but I can see that what he's looking for is consistency. What we do want is consistency, and I think that if Priti Patel learns from this experience, I would give her the option to continue in the role. She has wanted to continue. She could have resigned. She chose not to.
Yeah.
And I think it was the right thing to do. So herein now lies the big question, which is behavior. So if her behavior was under question, fine. I would also ask, what about others? Because were the civil servants' behavior right? Not necessarily using bad language, but maybe they weren't doing what they were told to do.
Yep.
But what about going forward? And that's the key now. How does the relationship work going forward? Because clearly there's some angst, there's some issues that needs to be resolved. My feeling here is that it's an opportunity to now work together, where actually domestically we need to get our house in order. It's if we look at Britain as it stands, whether it's our policing, crime, whether it's just the general way in which we are looking at our home civil service, I think that there's a lot of changes that need to be made. We've already seen the public pay sector has been frozen. Yes, Mr. Johnson, you've already made that call. That's not going to sit well with some civil servants and people who are working in the public sector. Nobody wants that. However, the reality is that as a country, we're in desperate times. We're under COVID-19 still. We're still struggling with that. And I think that the reality now has to be that for 2021 onwards, I would like to see that people rally behind Priti Patel, and maybe perhaps some of the new positions that have just been vacated. Sir Alex Allen, thank you for your service. Whoever takes over has an opportunity now to work with Priti Patel and Boris Johnson and obviously the cabinet and maybe improve some of the inefficiencies that have been going on in back rooms for many,
Yes,
many
I
decades.
suppose slightly unstated as we just come to a conclusion here. I suppose unstated is the point that some of her comments, although stated maybe in too vociferous a fashion, may well have been correct. I was saying about, yes, there were particular issues with the civil service, and that they needed taking down a peg or two. But she may well have been pointing out a real changes that need to be made, and I think those changes do need to be made to allow for decision making to be made in the right way. In other words, by the ministers, by the government, because too often in the past we have seen a sort of a bit of obfuscation. Civil service getting in the way of the of implementing government and ministerial decisions. That needs to stop. And so, if that's what she was doing, which some of it, I think, would have been that, then that's a good thing. And as I say, this is a special case. I'm not generally in favour of bullying. What I'm saying is, if this was bullying, she has apologized, which is good.
Correct.
And she should change from the intimidating behavior, from the swearing and the shouting. However, she shouldn't change from getting them to change their practices to fit in to get in line with government policy, because it's the government that we've elected.
Yes, indeed. Well, what do you think, folks? We really would like to hear from you. Now, the head of the Committee on Standards in Public Life, Lord Evans, has said that there were serious questions about the process for investigating breaches of the Ministerial Code, which must be urgently looked into. So we value your thoughts. What should happen? Do you think actually that in this particular case, Priti Patel should have gone? Or maybe you think, actually, no, this is just a warning, and maybe next time she will learn from her lessons. If it happens again, then it can be reviewed. Why not log on to markandpete.com? You can see the website rolling on underneath the screen before you. We'd love to hear from you, and we will certainly read out your thoughts on the next show. Well, join us again for more topical topics with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark.